Welcome to the UK OCR Community Podcast, presented by Obstacle Racing Media. Each episode, we'll be talking to race directors, elite runners, weekend warriors, and frankly, anyone else from the UK OCR scene that will talk to us. Here is your host, Alan, aka Muddy Duck.
Anywhere in Chicken Town. The bloody scene is bloody sad. The bloody news is bloody bad.
Listeners, welcome once again to the UK OCR podcast, and a little bit different for me and something a little bit out of my comfort zone. Today we are going to be talking about menopause, and I've got two beautiful ladies. I'm not going to make any jokes about Greg Wallace recently talking about ladies of a certain age, because that is inappropriate, and that's not me. But let's go to who we have got on today. Dawn Jollies, welcome to the UK OCR podcast.
You've stolen my thunder, Alan, because I was going to refer to Greg Wallace and women of a certain age. Thank you for having us.
Great minds think alike, great minds think alike. And we have got Kerry Eddie. Now, people don't know Kerry, but we'll come back to what she's doing in a minute because she's absolutely phenomenal. Kerry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. Looking forward to it.
I'm going to go over to you, Kerry. You know, I've got a bio for you here, and I could go read this. I could make a whole podcast out of your bio. You have done so much in sport. Give us some highlights, some of my listeners, because when we get talking about menopause later, we're going to go a little bit into depth in it, and you are a bit of an expert in many things. But give people a little bit of a background about you and what makes you, I'm going to say an expert, because your resume is an expert.
Oh, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but yeah, my whole life has been sort of dedicated to sport, I suppose. I was an athlete, I was a PE teacher, I've been an elite level athlete, a GB athletics coach, a national coach mentor to England athletics coaches, a personal trainer. So I've had lots of different roles. I've done lots within school sports. I've worked with kids from, people from 6 years old up to 70 years old, and, at elite level and beginner level. So I've got a full range of experience within sport and fitness, really, and education, I suppose.
And when you say elite level, just to get our listeners, what we mean by elite level, we are talking top of the game, ranked number 3 in Great Britain between 1996 and 2002. That is that's top level athletics. That is top level.
Yeah, I was in the sport a long time, and was at the top for quite a long time, and competed internationally. I had quite a long athletics career because I did the Heptathlon, which is 7 events. It's an event that it takes like OCR, there's a lot of things involved in it, and it takes a lot of time to learn all the skills, and so you sort of develop later in that sport. It takes so long to master all, putting it all together, really, I suppose. So, and there's always something you can improve on. So you're constantly, a lot of people do stay in it for quite a long time because there's so much to learn and so much you can still improve in, and you're competing against yourself as well as other people. So there's that challenge to keep going with it, I suppose. Yeah.
What was your favourite discipline in the heptathlon?
I was probably best at the sprint hurdles, the 100 hurdles. That was probably my highest scoring event. And against other heptathletes, the 200 metres and the high jump. Those were my 3 sort of specialities, I suppose. I was not a great thrower. But yeah, and 800 metres wasn't brilliant either, but it wasn't too bad. But yeah.
So I'm going to give my highlight of high jump. I was school champion 2 years running in high jump. Yes, I was the only one that mastered when I was at school, and we are a similar age, without giving it away. But when I was at school, they did the straddle or the Fosby flop, and I was the only one at age 12 that could do the Fosby flop. And that's obviously I got so much higher than everyone else. So yeah, 2 years in a row I was school champion for high jump. So that was probably my achievement. Nowhere near as good as yours, but and Dawn. I mean, most people know you, Dawn, from British Obstacle Sports, but I mean, you put something on for me because I asked you to put something on that you didn't know. I never knew you were part of England Rugby.
Yeah, so I coached kids on England Rugby, but then I also got asked to take part of the England Rugby Coach Mentor Programme. So for the last 3 years, I've been mentoring female coaches going through the coaching programme with England Rugby. So that's quite cool.
That's got to be really rewarding, being because at this moment in time, both women's rugby and women's football are absolutely, I want to say, probably the biggest growing sports in the world at this moment in time. Because for years it's been very male dominated, and now we've got these women coming through that are performing at peak performances and doing better than the men's teams. Don't shout that out too loud, Alan. But doing better than the men's teams. And it seems, but the nation seems to be behind it as well.
It's absolutely, it's massive. And England Rugby launched a women's 2025 World Cup Impact Programme, and they launched it in 2023 when we knew that the World Cup was on the tables, and since then they've really put a lot of effort and a lot of drive into getting more female coaches and more female referees, and I think you've even seen some of the men internationals have had Holly Davidson in their refereeing. And she's an amazing woman and has done so much for female referees within the sport. So, yeah, there was a huge drive, and at grassroots you see a lot of women actually at the side of the pitch coaching and refereeing, and the girls' game has grown phenomenally. So when 2025 with the World Cup coming to the UK is going to be absolutely massive and a huge drive for women's rugby. Absolutely.
I just think it's phenomenal. And I love how, when I was growing up and I was trying to play football, that the men's football teams played at places like Man United and Main Road and all the other grounds around, the big, but the women never played at that. And now we've got it now, but both in rugby and football, that they're playing at the big grounds. There is no differentiation now between men and women. There should never ever be a differentiation. I've never liked that. We should always play the same football grounds and rugby grounds. And I like that even better. That is one of the biggest things for me, that, people who have probably never been to Twickenham to watch the men's rugby team can now go to Twickenham to watch the women's rugby team, because they can get tickets. And what an amazing ground that is.
Actually, if you've not been to a rugby match, and I know you guys play league,
yeah, we do.
In your neck of the woods, and not so much union, but if you've not been to a rugby match, I would recommend go and watch the Red Roses play, because the women's rugby is so fast, so technical, and it's actually a phenomenal game to watch. When you watch the men's rugby, it's changing a little bit now with the new tackle heights and things like that coming in. The game is changing, so it's a little bit faster. But typically the men's rugby game has been hit, stop, go, and they kind of progressively work their way up the field. Whereas the women's game is it's so fast. It's so technical, and it's an amazing game to watch with an amazing atmosphere. So if you've not watched a game of rugby and you want to go and watch them, Red Roses is the absolute people to go and watch.
Oh yes, love it. I'm gonna say I'm more of an armchair fan now than going to watch them live, because after all, every weekend we're doing OCR of some kind in some place somewhere around the world now. So let's talk about OCR. Let's talk about Spartan 2024. I know you're keen on this, Dawn. It's been an amazing year for Spartan. I know Kerry did well in that, but talk us through Spartan this year.
Yeah, so when I was I'm going to backtrack ever so slightly and just talk about where this all came about in terms of why I wanted to look into Spartan and look into the results and things. And I think what instigated that sort of delve into the stats, if you like, over the Spartan season is some of the challenges that I'd had in terms of trying to qualify for the national team, and looking at qualifiers and looking at different races and looking at participation numbers. And I started forward tracking and looking at 2025. I moved into a new age group and now trying to sort of like suss out who's going to be in my age group and where that might sit and how that might look for me from a personal perspective. I started to sort of uncover a bit of a pattern. And it became really apparent that as we move up the age groups from a competitive standpoint, we see quite a high attrition rate in the older age groups, and they become less and less and less. And from a competitive standpoint, so what you tend to find is the people at the top of the games, the Kerrys, I'm going to call out some other names, the Laura Haywoods, the Nkanes, they're at the top of their game. They've been athletes on an international stage for 20 years, and so their muscle memory and it's ingrained. Everything is ingrained in them. So they stay because they love the sport. And it's their life. And if they didn't do that, what would they do? So you get the very, very top stay as the age groups get older. But what you lose is the middle to the bottom of the field. And I was like, okay, if that's happening within the competitive age groups, what's happening within the non-competitive and within the open categories? So I went and I did a little bit of a stat hunt, and Spartan was a really easy one to pick on because you can go back over all the results and you can look at how many people competed, how many took part from an open standpoint, and what age groups they sat in. So I'm going to read out some stats. And I did 2 sets of figures, and they were all the open categories, and they were the age groups from 18 up to 44 is one set of numbers. And then from 45 to 60 plus was another set of numbers. So we go to Henley, which was the first race of last year, or this year, we're still in 2024. We had 101 in the younger age group, but only 26 in the older age group. And that was in the Beast. The Super, there was 243 women in the 18 to 44, but only 70 in the 45 to 60. Moving on to the Sprint, there was 148 in the younger age group and 43 in the 45 to 60. So we lose 2/3 of the field. And that kind of correlated as we went on throughout the season at different locations. Badminton, the sprint, so the 5K difference at 160 versus 52. The Beast had 113 versus 28. And that even dropped off more at Pippinford. The Beast had 109 and 27 in the 45 to 60, and the Super at Pippinford had 304 women in the 18 to 44, which is amazing, but only 80 in the 45 to 60. So it's just it was a huge drop off and a huge difference in numbers. I think Hvar in Croatia, that amazing event there, they had something like 120 in the sprint in the open, but only 13 women in the 45 to 60 category. And I looked at the men, I compared some of the men's figures, and there was a drop off as well of probably about 60%, but it wasn't as significant as what you had in the women. Now when you look at the competitive is even worse. So you look at, I'm going to pick out the lowest of the numbers, which was Pippinford. You had 22 competitive females in the 18 to 44, but only 7 in the 45 to 60, 42 in the Super, and only 15 women in the 45 to 60 category. So that really tells you that the top of the top stay, but I don't know whether the top of the top stay and then the middle to the lower move to the open. Or whether they just drop out. So then I started asking some questions. I went out to my age group, or the one that I'm in now, the 45 to 49s, and I sort of said, what's happening? Are you guys, this is what I'm going through, and these are the challenges that I've had this year. And it was very much like, no, we're good, we're fine. A lot of them, sort of they've just moved into my age group, so in the younger age. So then I went to the next age group up, the 450s to 54, and kind of had the same conversation, and it was night and day the difference. A lot of the women that I was talking to in that age group had moved into open, had decided that they didn't want to compete because training was harder, recovery was harder, there weren't the numbers, so now all of a sudden they felt a little exposed, because you're now standing on a start line, and at Spartans we all start together. So you're standing on a start line with, let's pick a number. Let's say we're on a number with 57 women, and you're standing there amongst 57 women who are aged from the age of 18 upwards, and they go off the start line and it's like, bye.
Yeah.
See you at some point at the end. So all of a sudden you're anxious and you're slightly intimidated, and all of these things are all of the things that I was feeling. And then when I had the conversation, when I reached out to your community in the UK OCR community, it became really apparent that lots and lots and lots of women out there were feeling exactly the same. And I just wondered, is there a wider correlation that we need to look at and try and support and find a support network for these women? And also from a participation standpoint, how do we get them not to drop out? How do we get those 80 women to become 160 women, to become 240 women? How do we get to keep those women in the sport? Because it's so vitally important to stay active and to keep active, and Kerry will probably touch on some of this when we go over to her. It's quite crucial for, let's use the terminology, women of a certain age, to keep active, to stay in sport, to keep moving, to do the weight bearing exercise and all of these things, and to find support in their community. So yeah, it's really trying to find a way of reaching out to those women and sort of saying, hey, look, you're not on your own. There's a whole load of us that are feeling the same way. Let's bundle in this together.
I see. I get all of that. While you was talking, then I had a quick look on last year's UK OCR series, and I thought, is there a correlation from Spartan to the UK OCR series? Now I know British Obstacle Sports have been doing so much work, to join forces with people all across. And I was quite interested that there is a slight correlation, but not as bad. So, in terms of females, and we only go below 40. So, we go master, which is 41 and above. So our 41 and above last year, we had 45. We're below, we had 97. So it's a little bit different. It's not quite as bad, I guess, as Spartan. But I do get the whole thing that people of a certain age, and men and women, both drop off. But it's quite interesting that that's a huge drop off for females, because that is massive. I mean, it is. The figures you gave me, in the Beast, 25% of are over 45s compared to 18 to 44. The others are about 33%. But it's massive. That is a massive drop off.
It is, it's huge, and it's interesting when you refer to the UKCR stats, but they're competitive. So they're competitive age, the age group racers. So you get probably about a half. So that correlates with the figures that you have. So you have half in the younger age group, and then a half of the number in the older age group. And I think that correlates with the figures that you've got, in terms of your masters figures. But those people stay around because they're competitive and they're in the sport, and they're, and they're kind of, especially the UK OCR series, it's quite it's an intense, it's a commitment. They're traveling all around the country. So they're the people that hell or high water. It doesn't matter what's broken, what hurts, what's not functioning properly. They're on that start line and they're racing. They're really interesting figures, and it would be good to try and pull some figures from, say, like nuclear races. I don't think it's quite as easy to see the stats that they, maybe on a wet and windy afternoon, I'll go through nuclear's past data and see if I can pull some figures from there. But I think the competitive side of our sport is always going to be the smaller elements, and the thing that, actually from a non-boss standpoint, I look at it and I go, participation. It's all about the fun runners, the people that are out there week in, weekend, having fun, who are doing it from a recreational standpoint and from a life fitness standpoint rather than a competitive fitness standpoint. It's those people, it's those women. Where are they going, and why are they going?
So when you reached out to the community, what was the biggest thing, menopause, that people was finding it hard to train and things like that? Or was there other factors that people talked to you about?
So there are other factors. I think obviously depending when, where you are with your stage of life, depending, if you're married, have kids, when you have kids, I'm quite fortunate. I've got a 19 and a 14-year-old. 19's off at university. 14, he absolutely loves his OCR, so he's everywhere with me. So that's, from that point of view, it's really easy. But not everybody's in the same situation. Some people have kids later, so now, you know, they're mum taxes, or they're, you know, taking their kids around to their sporting activities or their school activities and things. So I think there are lifestyle factors that come into play. And a lot of the conversations we had that kind of came out on Facebook when we posed the question, and sort of, you know, said that I was going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole investigating menopause. It was interesting because women didn't necessarily come back and say, yes, I am menopausal. They came back and went, well, I kind of have this happen and this happens, and I'm kind of suffering with this, and training's harder, and I can't train as much as I used to, and my recovery is harder, or I just get pre-race anxiety and I panic about being out on course, and I panic about being last, or I panic about not being able to do things, or I'm not sleeping as well. So lots of little things that when everybody kind of, we then generated a little sort of community group that we'll come on to at the end. When we all started talking privately within that community group, so like it was a little bit of a like Me Too type scenario where we're all kind of going, well, yeah, I get that as well, and yeah, I'm getting that. And so it was kind of almost like linking the pieces of the puzzle together to go, actually, maybe we are all either perimenopausal or menopausal. And then we spoke to a couple of the older ladies. So Wendy Brothers was fabulous, and she shared her story with us, and she's out the other side and could very much share her experience of the things that she'd gone through. And she came into OCR very late. So by the time she came into OCR, she was sort of slightly past the worst of it, if you like. But, you know, was shared her story of the things that she suffered with. And yeah, it was just everybody kind of started correlating little bits of puzzles, and it just started to make a little bit of sense. And I think certainly from my point of view, my education point of view, I thought menopause kind of happened, you know, when you're in your mid-50s for a couple of years and then it was done. And actually, I mean, and Kerry will probably touch on this when we start talking about what, you know, what it is and what the processes are and what women go through and all the things like that. But actually, some women can start menopause or perimenopause in their 30s or their mid 30s or their early 40s, and so it's a long process. And if it's certainly for me, I mean, I turn 50 next year, so I not really thought about it. It's like something I didn't have to think about it because I wasn't going through it. But actually, when I sit back now and I'm like, it's probably been happening for quite a few years. And that resonated with a lot of other women as well. It was a lot of similar conversations and similar stories of things that had been happening for a number of years. You know, women had gone to their doctors and had been offered antidepressants. Oh, you must be depressed. Here, have some antidepressants. And actually, they're not depressed. They're just going through all of these changes that are not necessarily correlated with the menopause.
I get that. Now, you mentioned something there, perimenopause. Now, the only peri I know comes on chicken at Nando's. Tell me, what is perimenopause? Because I've heard of menopause, but I've never heard of perimenopause. Kerry, do you want to answer this one for me?
Yeah, sure. So we'll just go to, so menopause is sort of, so that's when, you know, the women's reproductive system sort of comes to an end, when we've gone 12 months without a menstrual cycle. That is menopause. It is a single moment in time. That 12 months, that's it. That's menopause. And then you're post-menopause. Now, the whole process of the slowing down of the reproductive system, your hormones fluctuate, and that is leading up to that, and that is perimenopause. So it's that is the worst time. So we hear about menopause being, oh, it's all this, but it's actually the hardest time is the time leading up to it. And as Dawn says, a lot of people don't realize they're even in it. You know, there is a lot more information, a lot more awareness now, but a lot of people, you know, even I, being, you know, a fitness professional for years, didn't realize. I'm like, oh God, actually, yeah, some of these things that I've been experiencing it could have been part of the hormonal shift. So basically, perimenopause, your hormones are fluctuating. You know, as everything's slowing down, and it's the changes in those hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the changing levels of them brings out a whole load of symptoms as your body's trying to readjust. Our bodies are, very clever. They try and adjust to the changes going on, and those changes are then seen sort of in various bodily things that go on. So, the mood swings, disturbed sleeps, you've probably heard of, the night sweats, the hot flushes, and those can start for years before and you're not even realizing it. That sort of disturbed sleep. I know a lot of women, they haven't been able to sleep since they had kids.
Yeah.
So they don't actually realize the fact that they're not sleeping well could be down to their hormones as well. So a lot of disturbed sleep, increased anxiety, you're not able to manage stress as well. So as Dawn said, a lot of women go to the doctors thinking there's something wrong with them, and they're prescribed antidepressants or anti-anxiety tablets. And that is actually part of it. It's part of how the body sort of responds to what's going on. And then there's lots of other aspects in terms of the active women. You'll notice that, as Dawn said, that you lose your strength, you lose your power, your muscles start to deteriorate. You lose muscle mass. You find running harder because your aerobic system sort of changes. That estrogen has a lot to do with your energy systems, and as that declines, you're less aerobically efficient. You have to actually train slightly differently. A lot of people experience with me, my heart rate, as soon as I started running, my heart rate was going through the roof. It was like going beyond what my maximum heart rate should have been. I'm like, why can't I run anymore? And everything just seems so much harder. You couldn't sprint anymore, got no power. And I just thought, oh, that's just part of the aging. And it wasn't till I sort of, did my own research that I understood that this is part of the perimenopause. This is part of the changes that happen.
Now, I'm a little bit. I'm a thick northerner. I like to call myself a thick northerner. So I'm just going to go back a little bit here because I believed, and I think probably a lot of the men might believe this as well, and I don't know if women might believe it too, that the menopause or the perimenopause, should just explain that bit to me, literally lasted for 12 months. That it was from when the reproduction system stopped to, stop working to when you got in 12 months. So we're saying that it actually goes back it can go much further back than 12 months?
Yeah, 10 years.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people, it's 10 years. It's a 10-year process. So the average woman goes through menopause 45 to 55. Some, younger than that, and it can be brought on by other things as well. But yeah, 10 years prior to that. And as Dawn said, there are even some women in their 30s are experiencing the symptoms of it. A lot of things are common. A lot of things are, we all live busy, stressful lives, and there are a lot of things that you can put down to that. But I think the combination of things makes everything, because I was asking the question, why are we all really struggling and suffering with these things, when in the past we've not really heard about it? And I think it's that combination of, we are doing more, we are busier, we want to keep active, we have got kids, we've got high profile jobs, we've got all these things, and they all come at once. And we have got stress, and our body can't handle the stress when we're going through these hormonal changes. So we are all, fit and healthy people are struggling as well with what's going on, and it's over a long time. Yeah.
So there's no defining moment. It's a, if I'm getting this right, there's no defining moment. It's a multitude of things that will build up. And some people may get more and some people may get less. We don't know what it is. But basically what we're trying to say is that people will start to go for it for 10 years before, or maybe for several years before they even realise that they're actually starting the menopause.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So you usually, there's some pretty horrible sort of symptoms to begin with, with the just things that have been different to how you've experienced, like your menstrual cycle before. There's massive changes in that. You could have had a really nice ride through years and not had too much pain and discomfort or PMS. Then suddenly you're like a raging lunatic, and everything's, you can have a lot heavier periods, a lot more cramps, a lot more, discomfort and, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? I've never experienced this before. And, it then does have an impact on exercise and your health. And, you can understand why a lot of women turn to drinking and just want to feel better, which, isn't necessarily the best way to go. Especially if they're not knowing what's happening. And, we've all heard stories about women going to their doctors, and it depends which doctor you go to as to the sort of advice that you get. Some just dismiss it. Oh, you're too young to be going through this. No, come back. You're fine. I just take these antidepressants or just try this. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Things are moving forward, but yeah, still a lot more education needs to be made.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to you're educating me. I'm finding it's very educational. How did you know, Kerry, that you was going through it? What was the defining moment for you that made you realise that you were perimenopausal?
Well, yeah, for me, it was definitely like I was one that, hadn't had quite like mild, never really had what they call. Oh, I've got brain fog. That's one thing.
This is a defining moment right now.
That is my worst symptom, is my memory, and my mum, had dementia, and for years I think, geez, I'm getting dementia already. I'm getting early onset of dementia because I just couldn't remember things and started to forget names like she was. So that was one thing. So I didn't have a lot of premenstrual tension. That was the one. Yeah, I didn't have lots of mood swings or anything, but definitely I went through a sort of difficult period with the family ages and the husband, and just not feeling like myself and not managing things as well as I had previously. But then, like I say, with my my periods, they'd gone from being quite regular to, there'd be 10 days between them, 2 months between them. They were very erratic. So there was that. And then it was the fitness side of things that I didn't realize were connected. And it wasn't until sort of years later that I've realized that, oh my God, yeah, that's all related. I was just thinking I was like just losing it. I was getting old. And this is what put me off competing, from being a sort of a high level athlete and still always training. And, that's my job as well, training other people. So I was always fit, but I was just finding it so much more of a struggle. And one of the reasons I chose to do OCR was I could still use some of my strengths, the things that I'm good at, but I wasn't comparing myself. I didn't want to train to get worse. That was a big thing for me. I was like, I couldn't cope with this getting less, losing my speed, losing my fitness, losing my strength. It's something, I identified as being, quite athletic and strong and independent. And, I was starting to lose this. And I needed to find something where I could still challenge myself, still prove to myself that, I am good, I am physically able, but without sort of that pressure of getting worse. So the fact that the different races, you can't exactly compare yourself to your performance. Like, your time in one race is not exactly the same as another one. Whereas, if I was doing a track race, I could see my performances getting worse. So that was something that just like freaked me out. And it's not until I've learned that, you don't have to, lose all your strength. There are ways around it, and you just have to approach things differently. But that was, and I think, maybe that's another reason training to get worse was just like, oh, I can't be doing that.
Yeah, I get that. Before we talk about how we try and overcome it a little bit, Dawn, what was your first recollection? Is it similar to you when you first realised you'd started?
So I think if I wind the clock back quite a long time, I think about night sweats. There's quite a lot of times that I would wake up absolutely soaking wet, and just like, oh, maybe it's because I bought a 16,000 tog duvet and it's a little bit snuggly and a little bit warm. And then probably the training is probably I had a slightly different journey. So I had very, very debilitating cramps, and so I ended up being investigated for a thing called endometriosis, which luckily wasn't there, but the gynecologist said yes, likely to be things like perimenopause, so that would have put me in my very early 40s. So I had a coil fitted, and that kind of, has helped me through the last probably 10 years. But certainly the last 3 years, just my training, I'm quite in tune with my body and quite hard with my training. And Guy, husband, has always sort of said I'm a bit like Forrest Gump when I train. It's kind of, it's head down, arse up, and get to a certain point, and then the blinkers come on, and it's like, right, okay, we're going, and we're doing this, and we just keep going. And I kind of seem to have lost that a little bit. We had a conversation the other day, and it's like, what's happened to the girl that is literally like stubborn, head down, and just gets on with it? And it's like, you know what, I don't know, it's just tired. When I lift, when I strength train, things hurt. I used to train 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day, and this was only 2020, 2021 when I was training like this. And now if I have a really heavy training session, I have to have a day off, sometimes 2 days off, because my recovery is just not there anymore. And I think that's possibly why you see some women who go to the more endurance events, because it's the slow twitch muscle fibers, it's the longer, it's the endurance, it's the lower heart rate, it's the literally one foot in front of the other, as opposed to the hard and fast sort of competition. But yeah, probably the training side of it was, for me, was the thing that I really noticed the difference, and just the recovery processes and things. And actually weight gain, I'm going to throw that one in there. Now people look at me, they'll go, but you're really slim, you don't have a weight gain problem. I have to be very, very careful with what I eat. And even if I'm training loads, still carry a little bit around my midsection that I never used to carry before. Drop off the wagon for a little bit. And if I'm not careful, quite easily put on 10, 20 pounds, which is then really hard to shift. So yes, weight gain is actually quite a big thing. And that's a massive confidence knock as well. If you've always been quite athletic in terms of your athletic build and things like that, to have the muscle attrition and the weight gain at the same time, that's quite a mental block to get over as well.
Wow, that's quite interesting from my point of view, that it's not the same thing. I've got two women here that have completely different surroundings, and you've got so many different things that have happened in each of your stages as you started. That you could be no further apart, but you're going through the same thing. That is not shocking. That's surprising. And I guess this is sort of where it comes in, that women don't understand, as you said earlier on. Women always don't understand that they're going through this stage in their life until something actually changes and makes them stand up, or gets advice from someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I think it's the identifying that they're not losing the plot, or they're not having a mental breakdown, or they're not, I want to swear now, not being a bitch. And it was one of the things that one of the women's in our group said. Her husband turned around to the one day and went, "You are being a complete and utter bitch." And she was like, "I know, but I can't help it." And it's just it's just, sometimes the guy will sit down next to me sometimes to eat dinner, and I'll look at him and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Literally, what are you doing? I'm like, go and sit on the sofa over there, please. Just move, because I want to kill you, because I can hear you eating. But it's just those little moments, and it's not a one cap fits all. And I think that's the thing. I think, and I am, when I now talk back to the competition, and I'm flitting slightly, but, from a British obstacle sports standpoint, I want to talk to the federation. We have a national governing body now, and I do sit and I manage the national team. I want to go back to the board at British obstacle sports and say, look, you have a collection of women here who, when they hit a certain point in their lives, they have massive challenges. And like you've just identified, those challenges are wide reaching. It's not a one cap fits all. It's not that person has a sprained ankle and is competing with that person who has a sprained ankle, and so does that person, and so does that person. It's not, you've got a wide range of different, and you could call them disabilities. You've got a wide range of symptoms that are happening within this community of women, and yet they are being judged, ranked, expected to compete at the same level as everybody else. Their qualification criteria is exactly the same. The way that they race is exactly the same. The way that they're judged is exactly the same. And I think as a national governing body, we should look at that collection of women slightly differently in terms of what we expect out of them. Because everybody's, and suffering is a dramatic word, and some women will suffer, and some might cruise through the whole menopause a little easier than other, and you really can't identify. If you had 20 women standing in front of you, you couldn't identify which was which, because on the surface they would all look the same, and things that are happening inside and internally, both physically and mentally, are not necessarily manifested in what you see as a picture.
Yeah, I get that. Kerry, how you touched on a little bit earlier on how it affected you in terms of your muscle strength and things like that. From an athlete's point of view, what is the worst case scenario of this affecting you? What is the worst case that you've seen?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is you're so much more susceptible to injury, and it's very easy to sort of, as Dawn says, you're putting on weight you've never gained it, but you've never had before. So you try and train harder. You're more careful about what you eat, which can lead to people under fueling themselves. If you're not eating correctly, there's a lot of inflammation, and there's a lot of, you're far more susceptible to injuries. So you start pushing yourself harder to try and train harder because you're getting worse. And it can just lead to ongoing injuries. I had a load of niggly injuries, and it wasn't till, someone said, till I did more research, that no, I've got to do less training and better training, because I was just running myself into the ground, just picking up one injury after the other. I was out for 6 months with a hamstring tear, after I thought, oh no, I can just keep pushing through. And I think, it's learning, knowing, tuning into your body and understanding that you don't need to train harder and more, but it's because you're motivated, you want to do well. So it's that impact in terms of people who are active. It's what Dawn's also said, the motivation goes, you lose your motivation, and when you've got all the injuries and you're finding hard training is so much harder, it takes longer to recover, you think, oh, what's the point? And and people get to that point where they give up. Even people who are really good at the high level give up because of all the the physical challenges, how draining and tiring it is, and the injuries and the lack of motivation.
And this brings us back a little bit to what Dawn brought up earlier on about the stats, isn't it? About there being a big drop off because people are getting injured. So you might have bought a season ticket and you can't use it for certain races. You might be planning on doing a sprint and a super and a beast all in the same weekend, but you go and do the beast and then you can't recover fast enough to do the sprint and the super on the Sunday, or the other way around, whichever way it will be. This is now all starting to make sense now. It's like I've got a flashing light bulb moment in my head now. So I'm going to say, I don't think there's going to be a cure, but how can we educate people, Kerry? What is there a magic bauble? I don't think there is, but maybe you might tell me. But how can we educate people to, I guess, not perform better, because that's not what I want to do, but people to understand how it affects them and maybe train better. That's the word I'm probably looking at. Train better.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I've been coaching women myself who are over 40 for the last 10 years, but it's only, there's more information coming out now. It's only in recent years that there is actually some research being done. A lot of, research in fitness is all done on men and all done on younger men. and there's not been a lot done on women, or there has been on menopause and women, but it's all on people who've gone active, telling them to do more exercise. So there's very little information, and only a few people out there, who specialize in training women who are already active to stay strong through it and get through it without giving up. And so I've learned quite a bit over the last couple of years about, how it impacts you physiologically, how it impacts your training and your performance, and how, a lot of this, we can mitigate a lot of the symptoms, but there's such a small margin for error. If you trained, just did random training up to now, you can't get away with that anymore. You can't just, I'll just do a bit what you feel like and a bit of this, I'll do some strength. Without a proper structured training with the right amount of rest, you can only improve from the amount of stuff that you can recover from. So unless you've got a proper structured schedule, you're likely to overtrain and get injured. There's just this smaller margin for error. And if you don't tune into your body, then you just get these repeated injuries. So it is educating people on the changes that do happen and the changes that you need to do to your training to accommodate the things that are going on. And you can, this has been my goal this year. I was so frustrated with being injured for 6 months last year. It just took forever to recover. I thought I couldn't run again. So I was determined that I could, and so that's when I did even more research, and I was determined this year I'm going to go through the whole year without being injured, because I'm going to train properly.
Yeah.
Go back to training as I was when I was an athlete. I've had to go to train, proper training plans and periodize it and stuff, rather than just, I need to do everything. And yeah, I've got through the season without being injured, so it sort of paid off. So yeah, there needs to be a little bit more education on, because, and I think in the group that Dawn's put together, people have put in there how they feel guilty if they miss training, and we've sort of felt that over the years. If you've done training and fitness for years, you feel guilty missing a session. You feel guilty if you can't do something. But you actually got to change your mindset, and more is not necessarily better. We have to train better and do the right things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Now, my partner Paula's going through menopause. I know she's going through menopause because I'm living it with her, and she was really, really bad not long since, to a point where she's always been fit, not fit as an active in lots of running and things like that. But her joints started to, I want to say, seize up. I'm going to say this is one of the biggest things. Her joints started to seize up. She was finding that when she went to the gym, instead of doing an hour in the gym, she couldn't even do half an hour because she was getting there and her joints were hurting that much. And she looked at medicines and things out there, and she's changed the medicine. I'll tell you what she's gone to HRT, and it's helped her get back to a better training. But there are other medicines out there. And there's lots of herbal remedies and things like that. In your experiences, have any worked for either of you, or do you, if you want to tell me, if you don't want to tell me, don't tell me, but is there anything out there that you'd sort of recommend, even if it was something herbal?
I mean, I would say HRT, get medical advice for that. It does help some women with symptoms, some people who are really out of balance. It can help. It's not a wonder cure. It will help relieve some of the symptoms. It will help rebalance things. It takes a lot of, from what I hear from people, it takes a lot of getting it right. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of supplements. I think getting the right nutrition, getting the right lifestyle habits and things need to be addressed first. We're very much, what can I take? What can I take to fix it? Whereas nutrition, getting the right nutrition, a lot of the issues are caused by inflammation and poor gut health. And so a lot of the symptoms can be relieved if you address those two things. And it's always best to address it through nutrition, proper food, before you go to supplements. The British and the American menopause associations only recommend that you take vitamin D. They don't recommend you do all these a Mediterranean style diet. They don't recommend any of the fasting and all the other things that you see on social media. The only supplement they recommend is vitamin D. The supplement industry is billions of dollars. So I would say address things with nutrition first. And if you need HRT, get medical, recommendations for that. But get tested. I say you get tested. If you have a deficiency in something, then yeah, get a supplement. But don't be sucked in by all these. It's menopause has become a new sort of thing. They're sticking menopause on all these supplements now, and so people are just buying them because they think it's gonna help. I don't know if Dawn's got any different view, but that's my opinion and view.
Just before I come to you, Dawn, sorry, just look at you, Don. I found that really interesting what you just said there, Kerry, about gut, because I know Paul don't mind me saying things about her, but I don't think she will, because she's very much just about helping people. But she has always suffered when she started going through the menopause. She started with problems with her gut. She would have indigestion. She would get acid. She would do a lot of this, and she's worked very much on her diet, and she takes these. They're not Actimos, but it's like a probiotic supplement. That got not a supplement. I can't remember what it's.
Probiotics and prebiotics. Yeah. Gut health has a massive impact on everything within our body. As our estrogen declines, it affects inflammation and it affects our gut microbiome, which has a knock-on effect on everything. So that is one of the biggest things that you can look at, getting that right. And probiotics, fermented food, those sort of things are helpful. If you can get your gut better, that'll have a knock-on effect on other things. So yeah.
So I think it's now twofold for her, because we've got a gut better because she hasn't had acid and indigestion for like 4 or 5 months, and then with HRT, and she's on a very low dose of HRT. I will say that it's like it seems to be a miracle cure for us. But it's interesting you said the gut there, because it is something that we've worked on. Sorry, Dawn, I was going off on tangents there, like I usually do on one of my other podcasts. Let's come to you. Similar question.
I sit in a similar camp actually, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I just started looking at I suppose herbal remedies is probably the wrong word. I have a bit of I think I have a bit of a theory about life and corporations and things, and I think the food industry as we know it today has us addicted to sugar. Yeah. And I think the pharmaceutical industry has us addicted to drugs, and it's I try and look at everything from a nutrition standpoint and from a food standpoint, and certainly when I was personal training, and I also specialize in sports nutrition, and whenever I had ladies come to me and they say, everybody when they come to you to train, the first thing they generally say is, I want to lose weight. I say, right, well, actually, you don't want to lose weight, you want to lose fat. Let's broad spectrum it. Put me on a diet, give me a diet, write me a diet. And my 2 pieces of advice that I would always say to them was, when you go into the supermarket, stay around the edge. Don't go in the middle. Go in, stay around the edge, leave. So your fruit, your meat, your dairy, get out. All the stuff that's in the middle, the boxes, the packages, everything that's contained in the middle, stay away from. And the second piece of advice was, if your great grandma does not recognize it as a food, probably not a food. And those are always my 2 bits of advice. And gut health, massively, everything starts in the gut, and a lot of the problems we have is inflammation and mucus buildup and things like that. So I take a Biomel. Either they do little 1 shots or they do little powder with a coconut water. It's a probiotic, vitamin D, and collagen, and that is where I'm at with what I do. And then everything else is food. It's it's fresh fruits, it's fresh vegetables, it's raw fish, it's non-processed. Organic as much as you can with how everything costs these days. But yeah, I'm very much in the camp of, if I can try and do everything from a nature point of view, then that's, and it's not to say that that's how everybody can do it, like say HRT. I haven't looked at it too much, and I think unless I completely lose my mind, I probably won't go down that route if I don't have to. but this is the same person that won't take a paracetamol if they've got a headache. So, you know, it's kind of, yeah, I personally want to try and do everything as holistically and as naturally as possible. But there is a time that, you know, people need that helping hand if, you know, their hormone fluctuations. And it was interesting, I was listening to a podcast the other day. Actually, one of the ladies in the group posted a podcast from I think it was Louise Newton, who's a doctor who's massive into menopause, and she was saying, you know, the menopause supplements that you find in the supermarkets, just chuck them in the bin, because it's you know, it's marketing, it's a lot of them are just not really worth it. And don't go and ask for a hormone test at your doctor's, because your hormones fluctuate massively throughout the day, you know, and throughout the month and throughout the week. So, you know, you can go to the doctor one day and say, actually, your hormones are really high and you're great and you're brilliant. And then you could go 5 hours, 6 hours later, and actually your hormone levels are now not where they should be. And so, yeah, I think everybody has to take it from their own standpoint and where they are personally, and look at what they need and what they feel they need to help them through the process. I think it's like everything with health. You can't say you have to do this, you have to follow this prescribed method, you have to have the HRT, or no, you have to do it through herbal, you have to drink red clover tea, you have to take this other, you know, this other array of herbal teas, you know, because otherwise you're going to have this horrendous time. I think it's talk to a community, talk to loads of women, gather as much information as you can possibly gather, and find a route that's right for you. But if it's not working, don't be scared to then go, well, actually, I'm going to look for something else. Yeah, I think that's probably the route that I will go down. I'll try everything holistically, but if it doesn't work, and if if I'm being the bitch, then it might be time to, you know, to look at alternative methods. But I think you have to, if you can find a community, which hopefully we're generating now, where you can have those conversations with other people and sort of, you know, rather, I don't want to trouble Guy with girl stuff, you know, I don't want to be a moaning Minnie to him, and you know, have him, he doesn't want to lose his wife, you know, he's 6 years younger than me, he's looking at me going, I'm not ready for this conversation about menopause. I mean, I'm not ready to turn 50 next year, so that's a whole new challenge that we're about to face, you know. And mentally I'm like still in my 20s, so, you know, he's not ready for me to hit that stage yet. I'm not ready for me to hit that stage yet. So it's kind of, by having a wider support network and a wider community of women that I can have those conversations with, I think it just massively helps.
I get that. And which brings it perfectly on to what you have launched, which is Pause. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Pause for Support is what we called it. I didn't name it at first. We just generated a WhatsApp group and we put a thing out on the BOSS community and the UK OCR community, and we said, look, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I don't know where it's going to lead me, and it might lead me to a dead end of people going, no, you're a lunatic and you're the only person that's feeling the way that you're feeling, and man up and stop being such a wimp and stop getting so anxious when you get on the start line. Just deal with it. It's like you're just having a meltdown. But I didn't. I like I say, we got lots of women come forward and go, right, so we generated this WhatsApp group, and it was nameless for quite a while. It's like, what do we call it? And then all of a sudden I was like, well, I didn't want to call it, you know, like a menopause support group, because it's so much more than that. So yeah, we kind of settled on Pause for Support, and I thought, actually, that's what you need to do sometimes, is just sit back, stop, and reach out. And I think there was a guy, wasn't there, a few weeks ago, who went to Nuclear Races and did was it a Share the Load? Yes.
Oh, Mr. Vosper.
Yeah,
Matt Vosper, if I want to say. Oh, he's one of my guests from about 4 or 5 months ago. Oh, I'm going to kill myself for not knowing it. Yes.
Yeah,
he carries his troubles on his shoulders.
That's it. And he did that whole, there's a whole group of them that all went around with that massive rec bag, and they shared it. And I was like, actually, that's exactly what it is. It's us just taking a minute out of our busy, crisis-filled, tantrum-filled workouts where we're sitting and we are questioning why the hell we're putting ourselves through preparing for another race season with all the stresses and the anxieties and everything else that goes with it, to just kind of stop, take a minute, reach out for that support if you need to reach out for that support, and just have a chat with other people, other women that are going through similar things, similar but different.
So basically, this is a safe place. This is a safe place. I'm going to ask, there's no men in there because sometimes men involved in it. So this is a safe place for women to share experiences, seek advice.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, and we've not. Yeah, absolutely. And we've not published the link. So we put it out there on social media to say that we have this WhatsApp group. If you want to join it, send me a message. And we'll send you the link. And it's there for biological women who are going through these changes and these issues, to just sit and have those conversations. And out of it, we found some absolute cherubs of support. We've got Kerry, who not only has knowledge from an educational standpoint, because the courses and the education things that she's done, but also from such a high level accomplished athletic standpoint. We have Josie Lloyd, who's just dropped into the group, who has a big community and is very, very passionate about everything perimenopause and menopause. And I had a chat with her this week, and she is phenomenally experienced for somebody so young. And I was I wouldn't say dismissive, but at first I was a little bit like, what's Josie going to know about menopause? She's like 20 years old. I'm like, really? But when we sat and we met for half an hour, and her knowledge and her empathy is phenomenal. And interesting, she doesn't come at anything from a performance standpoint. Everything is about women and about giving women the permission to feel the way they feel and address their feelings and not look at things from a performance standpoint. So we're not looking at you as an OCR racer and what your performance stats are and how fast you're running, or let's improve your 1 rep max, or let's improve your dead hang. Her approach is nothing to do with that, which was really, really enlightening, that her approach was actually about just embodying the feelings of a woman and saying, well, actually, no, let's validate why you feel like this, and then let's look forward and see how we can help you. So that was massive. So Josie's dropped into the group, and we're actually going to work on a webinar that we're going to put out to other women. So, but the group is, it's open for everybody. It's open for everybody, every woman, I should say, that wants to come in and wants to be a part of it and just wants to get a little bit of support. And people can contribute. People can watch, people can, they can add things into it. And actually, there's not a lot of chat in there. I think that we had a lot of introductions at first, and a lot of people introducing themselves and and saying who they are and what their experiences were. But there's not a lot of ancillary noise. I think sometimes you get these WhatsApp groups where it's literally pinging away every 5 seconds. It's really not. It's I think if people want a little bit of something or a little bit of support, they'll drop something in. And so it's as much in or as much out as people want.
Fantastic. I have to admit, I have heard things about it. It's very, very good. I've got a couple of friends in there, and they have given me great feedback, and it's helped them. So you're doing brilliant. So fantastic for that. Before we wrap it up, we'll go to you first, Kerry. Is there anything you want to add that you think that we've missed today, or anything you want to add? Full stop.
No, I think it's fantastic that you're bringing this to the table. You're bringing more education and awareness around it, and hopefully that'll help get more people in. I'm all for getting more people involved, women involved. I'm all about, people being happy and healthy, and it's such a great sport. If we can keep people in for longer, then yeah, it's fantastic. And then having a support group and greater knowledge in the community is all good. So yeah, it's great what you're doing. Dawn,
Thank
well
you,
done.
Dawn, absolutely amazing. Over to you.
No, I haven't got anything else to add other than thank you. Thank you for giving Kerry and I a platform. Thank you for giving us your time to host us. And it's great. And hopefully you've learned something that you can take away and help Paula.
100%. And I will stress that to all my listeners out there. Guys, you must have learnt something to this. You must have learnt something today. So bear that in mind. All the ladies out there, if you're having problems, you're not having problems. Even if you think you might be going through it, join Dawn, join Kerry, join the group, join Post for support. Please join it. Help them get wherever you want. In the meantime, listeners, thank you very much for listening. You take care, you stay safe, and we will speak to you all soon. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Alan.
I don't know what you want. Let's have a bit of fun till I die.
Thank you for listening to the UK OCR podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast today. If you like what we do, please think about joining our Patreon. It's only costs £2 a month, and it goes to help supporting us to put these podcasts on. Or, if you fancy a one-off payment, just buy us a beer. The links to both are in the description. In the meantime, you stay safe and you keep on running, everyone, and I'm sure we'll see you on the course soon. Take care. Bye.